Hello and welcome to this discovery session for a 2018 Ashford University Teaching and Learning Conference. My name is Herminda Ray and I will be your host for this session. Today we'll be discussing students' perceptions of active learning and online courses. This will be presented by our Forbes School of Business and Technology professors Bill Davis, Dr. William Woods, and Dr. Murad Abel. Also, special thanks to Dr. Rick Reed for his contributions to this presentation. We have Bill Davis from the Forbes School of Business and Technology. We have Dr. William Woods, also from the Forbes School of Business and Technology. And lastly, we have Dr. Murad Abel, also from the Forbes School of Business and Technology. Now I'd like to turn this over to Bill Davis.
Herminda, thank you. Everyone, today what we are going to cover in this presentation, obviously we want to welcome you to this. Our bios are in the TLC sections there. You can read about us if you'd like more information. We are going to share with you our research questions, as well as tell you a little bit about active learning theory, strategy, and methods. Active learning strategy, the research questions that we developed, the outcomes from those questions, results, and then our summary and conclusions, and then some comments on next steps for future research. And if you have any questions at the end of this presentation, we will have our email addresses for you. So with that said, our hypothesis that we started out with, we all said that we believe that active learning theory offers effective methods to further student learning and educational satisfaction. And the question we look to answer is, which active learning methods do students perceive to increase their learning and satisfaction? Now, a little bit about active learning. It was popularized by Bonwell and Eisen in 1991, and they described active learning this way: involving students in doing things. Have students think about the things that they are doing. And active learning requires intellectual effort, higher order thinking, and a means to assimilate, apply, and retain learning. Now, that study appeared in ASH, the Association for the Study of Higher Education. And there's a diverse range of alternatives for active learning. Most literature describing active learning says students must do more than just listen. They need to read, write, discuss, and be engaged as problem solvers. Now, what is active learning? This has been at the core of my teaching practices since I started teaching in higher education in 2004. And simply put, active learning is dialogue with self, it's dialogue with others, it's observing and doing. Now, quickly, dialogue with self, it happens when a learner is reflecting about a topic. They're thinking about their own thinking. The dialogue with others, this happens when a learner engages someone else or engages a textbook. Observing, obviously visual learners, this occurs when a learner watches or listens to someone else doing something that is related to what they are learning about. This might be such things as observing one's own teacher, supervisor, other professionals doing something. A direct observation means the learner is observing the real action directly. Now, doing, that's when students are doing something, when they're actually engaged in something, teaching part of a workshop, writing a paper. Now, how would you describe active learning? Well, it's participatory, it's involved, it's hands-on with reflection, it's non-isolated, it's communal, engaging, connecting the known and the unknown. Now, I wanted to put these learning styles in this presentation just as a reminder on the basic styles how people learn. Auditory learners, they learn best through hearing and using their ears and voices as the primary way to learn. Visual learners, they see. They learn best through seeing. Visual learners use their eyes as the primary sense when learning. Kinesthetic learners, they do learn best through touch, using their hands as the primary way to learn. Now, some examples of connecting active learning theory in a classroom with students. Simply put, you can organize in advance, be an advanced organizer, know what you're going in to the lesson, what you're bringing in, and have organized for learning. You can empower students to do some team teaching. Think, pair, share, break them up into groups, 5-minute think, pair, share. Here's a topic, come up with your conclusions, apply your critical thinking. 2-minute papers, journals, bookends, games, group projects, group test taking, icebreaker, interactive lecture and discussion. Now keep in mind, active learning is the process of doing and observing and dialogue with self and others. In these particular learning activities, all that comes together. Now, again, some of the rationale and definitions for active learning, repeating is one. Emphasizing a concept by explaining it in alternate terms. Again and again, repeating it so they get it and they understand it. Identifying relevance, specifically features a concept along a continuum of least to most important. And here, you're just basically telling someone why this is relevant and how it applies. Activating prior knowledge is a good one. Something they've done before and connecting the knowledge to that and helping them reflect and getting it into their working memory. Directing attention, helping others to perceive specific stimuli. Elaborating, connecting new information to prior knowledge. Chunking, this is one of my favorites, and I always used to tell my students, that there's so much content in a textbook, focus on the learning outcomes. That's what we want you to learn for that week, the week learning outcomes. If you get that, you pretty much have gotten the most important parts of the course. But, group the individual knowledge pieces into bits or chunks, into more large, meaningful units. And I've saved a lot of chunks through the years. Specifically, I learned all this active learning theory back in 04 and 05, and I've saved these and chunked them, and I use them again. And then, of course, organizing things and keeping them in a pattern. Now, active learning methods include that the learner will be engaged in the process of doing, observing, and they will have dialogue with self and others. Now, you notice I said that earlier. I've repeated it again because that is active learning. I've always believed in and practiced active learning and critical thinking theory, and I believe these methods help the content transfer optimally, which improves and develops the learner's retention, skills, and knowledge. From my point of view, it's important to share with the students that we're doing active learning in the class so they can see those dynamics and see what's going on and how all the pieces of the course come together to further their learning. This is an actual announcement that I post in my courses just as a reminder that we're doing active learning. And what I post is, remember, we're doing a lot of active learning in this classroom. And again, which is the experience of doing and observing, and you're having dialogue with yourself and others. I want them to realize those are all ways to learn. And in these groups and from your communication and dialogue, you will grow and more transfer of content will occur. And that's our goal, to further learning. There are many active learning strategies to take into consideration, and I share with them those strategies I showed you earlier. Now, with that said, I would like to turn it over to my colleague and friend, Dr. William Woods. Dr. Woods?
Thank you, Professor Davis, and thank you, Ms. Ray. I'm going to get into more about our methodology, and we'll go ahead and move to the next slide at this point. So our hypothesis and research question. We believe active learning theory offers effective methods to further student learning and educational satisfaction. The question we look to answer is, which active learning methods do students perceive to increase their learning and satisfaction? The purpose of our research is simple: to determine the student perceptions of active learning methods in the online modality and to assess which active learning methods are preferred by students. Now, one of the things I want you to realize is that with our methodology and our IRB approval, the process of courses surveyed, Dr. Abel, myself, and Professor Davis, we all had at least 3 courses that were surveyed. And in those courses, one of the things I want you to realize is that we started this survey at the beginning of the 5-week and 6-week periods, instead of waiting to the end of the periods when students are looking at their end of course surveys. And so that helped to reduce the bias that could occur at the end of the survey. And another thing that I want you to realize about our research was that with all of these courses, none of them were entry-level courses. So therefore, the students did have experience with learning in the online modality. Our survey instruments, survey questions, we utilize a typical 5-level Likert scale: strongly disagree, disagree, neither agree nor disagree, agree, and strongly agree. The scale refers to the student perceptions of active learning methods and how it impacts their ability to learn. Our survey questions were as follows, and we examined the following active learning methods. The first active learning method was process of doing. And with process of doing, we had one question: completing weekly written assignments, final summative assignments, final exams, discussion forum postings, researching, and creating replies to peers is very enjoyable for me and an effective way to learn. Our second active learning method was process of observing. And the question associated with that was, I learned more by observing in the online classroom, reading my peers' posts, instructor guidance, reading and interpreting my peers' replies, and reflecting on their dialogue and critical thinking. The third question was, I learned more by watching and listening to videos embedded and linked appropriately into the classroom forums and guidance, and by viewing data inserted into the classroom in graphical or tabular formats. Now, the third active learning method was dialogue with self. I learned more by applying my critical thinking in my assignments / papers. Or the next question was, I learned more by applying my critical thinking in my discussion forums. The fourth area of active learning, dialogue with others. The questions associated with that were, I learned more by interacting with my peers, engaging in social learning, and generating dialogue in the course discussion forums with my peers and instructor. Another question associated with that area of active learning, I gained satisfaction from contributing. I also gained satisfaction from reading. Lastly, I gained satisfaction from listening, and we told the students to please indicate if you are a graduate or undergraduate student. And next, for our results and outcomes, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Murad Abel. Murad?
Thank you very much, William. Appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to talk about results. So let me say that we've come to some pretty interesting conclusions here. They wouldn't necessarily be what you would expect because they seem fairly similar throughout a pattern. So this study definitely opens our eyes to some potential solutions to the online classroom, but also maybe some things that we could follow up with in future studies in order to gain greater insight. And that's pretty normal, right? That's pretty normal for most research, is that one study opens the door to other studies. Does not necessarily have to be groundbreaking, research, but it certainly we've learned a lot about what our student preferences are. Whether or not they're statistically significant is a different question, but they certainly seem consistently and logically valid sort of conclusions. So, okay, so let's first say written assignments, final summary assignments, final exams, discussion forum post, research and replying to our peers, enjoyable for me in an effective way. Most people seem to think that that's pretty decent. Remember, a lot of these students have already been socialized to the online environment, so they're accustomed to this. So it's not like a new student coming in for the first time truly evaluating their own activities. What's happening here is they're just going with the motion, say, do I like that? Well, you know what? It seems like they're okay with it, but it's not really an exciting thing for them. So point taken, okay? But we'll move on to some of the other questions, and this one will kind of get some more light shed onto it. So now we kind of get the numbers starting to switch. Instead of 50% agree, we're getting a lot more strongly agree, from 20 to 39, right? So I learned by observing the online classroom, reading my peers' posts, instructors' guidance, reading, interpreting my peers' replies, and reflecting on their dialogue and critical thinking. So they actually like watching and engaging with other people. They might not necessarily want to do the work, but that's like all of us, right? But it does appear that they enjoy getting along and getting into dialogue. So that's important. Point taken, ding, ding, here we go. So what we know now is that our students enjoy the process of engagement, not so much writing the discussion question, but the actual process of engagement. So courses certainly could be more engaging in the future, right? So that's a possibility. Next slide, please. So I learned more by watching and listening to videos embedded and linked into the classroom forums and guidance. So here we go. The numbers are pretty good in the strongly agree section. So what we can conclude from this, or at least highlight from this, is that it is possible that our students like technology. They like videos. They like to watch things that allow them to sit back and watch what's going on. They like charts. I mean, it makes things simple for them, right? This is a very different generation than the generations previously, where the questions would be all about, maybe the binding of the book and the print size, right? So how many pictures do you have in the book? We're in a whole new generation, technology world, that students say, hey, I want things that are well done and they're able to be used on my technology at home and my cell phone and my laptops. I can kind of sit back and watch what's going on. Next slide, please. I learn more by applying my critical thinking in my assignments. So this is still pretty high. Our students, we think, oh my gosh, they have, they like technology, they like to engage, they don't really like to do the work. Well, guess what? They like to do critical thinking. And that's a firm belief of mine as well, is that, students take in this information, it needs to apply to their lives. So as we go forward and do courses, critical thinking is can be a lot of fun for students, right? But only if it's going to apply to something they need and solves problems within their lives. So that's fantastic. Next slide, please. Next slide. There we go. I learn more by interacting with my peers, engaging in social learning, and generating dialogue. So they like this. They like to engage. They like to talk to each other. They like to chat with each other. They like to learn. So that opens the door to social learning. Well, maybe we found from a previous question that they don't necessarily like to do the discussion questions. Well, life's tough sometimes, right? But they do like to watch the videos. They do like to engage with each other. They do like to read each other's posts, and they like to think critically. So online should focus a little more on social engagement with each other, so students can engage with each other a little bit more and create sort of social learning environments. So that's fantastic, and that may include having pictures of students in classrooms. That might include better chat features and functions and more engagement in discussions and those types of things. So, but some way of drawing out conclusion. All right, so I gain satisfaction from contributing. Here we go. They actually do. They don't mind contributing. That's fantastic. So they enjoy talking and discussing and contributing and solving problems socially. Maybe that's a Generation Y thing. Next slide, please. I gain satisfaction from agreeing. Oh, here we go. It starts going flat again. We're back down to the 25% strongly agree. So they're not enjoying reading particularly that much. They're enjoying the videos. They're enjoying engaging. They're enjoying the chat functions. They're enjoying all those things, not necessarily so much into the reading. So, what one potential solution to that is, instead of having, the traditional, remember, we're in paradigm shifts going on right now. So in higher education. So instead of having really large books that students read, maybe we could be mixing some of that up with videos, smaller papers integrated throughout. 3-4 pages of reading instead of 100, 300-page book, right? We could just sort of integrate it in smaller chunks so they can enjoy it more, and then mix that up with some other types of technology. Next slide, please. So I gain satisfaction from listening. They kind of do. They like to listen. Probably the same thing that goes on with videos, why they like to listen and watch videos. So podcasts, and more voice recordings of professors and more readable technology, where they, maybe if they don't like reading, maybe we should think about including some audiobooks. That's another possibility that certainly could be explored in the online world, is saying, hey, you don't have to read it, but you could listen to it. Because I personally have a lot of students who did not read anything when they answered these questions, and we know that by just looking at the question. no detail in it. So next slide. Okay, so we kind of made an effort to understand the difference between, demographically graduate or undergraduate. Now, if we were going to do this study again, this is not so telltale-ing, right? But if we were going to do this study again, we would kind of be able to separate that out and see if there's any differences in the types of questions, how people answered the questions. Maybe the longer you're here, different kinds of results and those types of things. So, demographics would be more helpful in the future study. So, next slide, please. Okay, so I think this is where Bill Davis is going to pick up, and I'm going to bail out. Thank you very much.
Dr. Murad, thank you. And I'll go ahead and wrap this up. Our conclusions from the study. Our hypothesis, we believe active learning theory offers effective methods to further student learning and educational satisfaction. The data supports the hypothesis. There's a high percentage of strongly agree or agree, and you had heard that from Dr. Murad as he was sharing the interpretations from the survey. Also, to the research question. The question that we look to answer, which active learning methods do students perceive to increase their learning satisfaction? The data supports the research question. High percentage of students strongly agree or agree. We would like to thank you for attending this presentation. Again, remember active learning theory methods, dialogue with self, dialogue with others in the process of doing, and the process of observing. Thank you very much for attending. If you have any questions, there are emails. We'd be happy to talk further, share with you any information from the study or any information on active learning or this presentation. Thank you very much. Turn it back over to Herminda.
And thank you so much to Bill Davis, Dr. William Woods, and Dr. Murad Abel for a great presentation on students' perceptions of active learning and online courses. And thank you for viewing this 2018 Ashford University Teaching and Learning Conference Discovery Session.